All right, guys, so this is the extra credit review for the midterm, okay? So here's number 1. List all the possibles. Okay, so your constant is 3. What goes into 3? 1 and 3. Your leading coefficient is a 2. It's in front of the x to the 5th. What's in front of that? What's in front of the x to the 5th? A 2. What goes into 2? 1 and 2. Now start with the 1. So go 1 over 1 is 1. 1 over 2 is 1/2. 3 over 1 is a 3. 3 over 2 is 3 over 2. Don't forget you have to have the plus or minus, and you also have to have the parentheses. You guys, if you just leave your answer just like that, and you don't box or highlight your answer, I have no idea which one of those you're saying is the correct answer. So, don't think I'm going to assume that you know which one's it. So you have to go like that, okay? Question number 2, which of the following are possible rational zeros? So -5, -1/2, and 5/4. So just because you find one doesn't mean that you should stop, but basically you just store those in, plug them into the calculator, and when you do, if you get a 0, it's a solution. So the one that works is x equals -1/2. So I'm just going to tell you what buttons to push. You go -1, divide 2, store, enter. 4, membar, enter, raise it to the 4. -16, membar, enter, raise it to the 3rd. -85, membar, enter, x squared. Plus 202, membar, enter, plus 120 equals, and you get 0. So you know it works, and the other ones don't. Okay? Question number 3, given that x equals 2, find the remaining roots. Okay, so I'm going to put a 2 right here. And then across the f of x, I have an exponent of 3, 2, 1, and a constant, so I'm not missing anything. So I go 1, -2, 4, and -8. You guys had told me this was a 0. So when I do this long division, I better not get a remainder. So the 1 comes right down. 1 times 2 is 2. -2 and a positive 2 is a 0. 0 times 2 is a 0. 4 and a 0 is a 4. 4 times 2 is an 8. And I'm totally good. So it was an x to the 3rd. I did synthetic division once. So that's an x to the 2nd. So that's an x to the 2nd plus 0x plus 4 equals 0. So I noticed on the quiz, some of you at this point went to the quadratic formula, which is fine, but I think that's way more difficult than you need to. The fact that you don't have an x to the 1st in this allows you to just be able to take the square root to solve it, which I think is much easier. So just bring your 4 over, x to the 2nd equals -4, square root it, and you get x equals. Remember, when you square root, you have to include the plus and minus, and the square root of a -4 is a 2i. So that's it. Those are your remaining. Okay, question number 4. If x plus 3 is a factor, then what's the solution? Well, if you set x plus 3 equal to 0, you'd get x equals -3. That's it. Okay, question 5. Evaluate f plus g of 1. So that basically means find f of 1 and add it to g of 1. So if you look at an x value of 1 and you go up to f of x, which is the highest graph, you get a 5. Go again to an x value of 1, go to the g of x, which is the lower graph, and you get 1.5. Add those together, 6.5. Number 6. List all the solutions to the absolute value of x equals 2. Well, the absolute value is already alone, so it's x equals 2 or -2. You can write it like that. You can also write it like that. You can write them separately. There's lots of acceptable ways. Okay, here's question 7. Write the solutions to this in interval notation. So my recommendation, guys, is to just take 2 seconds and graph this. This test is so important. So step 1, isolate the absolute value, done. Step 2, make it an equal sign, done. Except don't change the number. Next step, split it. So you get x equals 4 and -4. Now I'm going to go to my number line. -4 over here, +4 over here. I have an equal sign because they're close because I have an equal sign. And this is what tells me where to shade. So this is not the problem where I fill in the signs. If it's a less than with an absolute value, you automatically know to shade the inside. So in interval form, it's -4 to +4 with a bracket, and you're done. I think this test is going to take you like an hour to take. I don't think it's going to be the full hour and a half. So why would you not spend that, 1 minute going through the process I just did to make sure you get it right? So anyway, I would totally do that. Okay, here's question 8. So given f of x that has a domain that x has to be less than or equal to 4, and then g of x domain is x has to be greater than or equal to -2. So guys, you have to satisfy both conditions. So here's a -2, here's a +4, and they're both closed because they both have equal signs. So look at this. Less than or equal to 4 means this way. Greater than or equal to -2 means that way. So I have to satisfy both of those conditions. So I'm looking for the double shaded region, which is right there. So in interval form, it's -2 with a bracket to 4 with a bracket, and I'm done. And same comment as number 7. I would absolutely graph it out and wrap my brain around it instead of just jumping to what I think the answer is. Okay, question 9. Write the difference quotient, but don't simplify it. Okay, so here's your difference quotient. So I do have some people that are struggling with this a little bit, and that is not uncommon for this concept. So for anybody that's, really struggling, so look, here's the first thing you do. Here is the second thing you do. Here is the third thing you do. So let's look at the pink, okay? F of x plus h means go in to f of x and see that x, just write it down, write down your f of x, but you would erase that x, and instead of putting an x, you would put x plus h. So this is the pink stuff. So that's done. This is a completely separate thing. It is not like some people are putting this green part in the bottom. It's separate, like it's a completely separate term. So now you just go minus separate term, write down what your f of x is, divide the whole thing by h, and there's your setup. You don't have to simplify it, okay? Number 10. Here's the difference quotient. Which one's a correct first step? So I'm just going to kind of look through them. So if you look at A, you guys, A is wrong because what they did is they took x plus h to the second and they didn't FOIL it. They just squared the x and squared the h, which is wrong. So I know A is not right. So look at B. If you take x plus h times x plus h, you get x to the second plus 2hx plus h squared, which they did that. Then they distributed the 2, which is totally good. Then the minus 3. Then you have the minus. They left it alone all over h. So B is totally good. Okay. Now, it says circle all that apply. So there could be another correct answer. So let's look at C. So on C, they dropped the first brackets. They didn't FOIL it out, which is fine. You don't necessarily have to do it the first one. But then look what they did. See the negative in where it says difference quotient, it says negative bracket x to the second plus x minus 3. That negative has to be distributed, which would make the 2 a negative and the 3 a positive, and that person did not do that. So C is not correct, so the only one is B. Okay, question 11. Find the domain. So when you do these problems, the first thing I want you to do is to factor. So the bottom's factor, the top goes 2, 3, and 2, and the biggest is the positive. So it looks like that. So the domain comes from the bottom. So you can just do it in your head. X cannot be 1/3. The way I did that, 3x minus 1 cannot be 0. 3x cannot be 1. X cannot be equal to 1/3. And they say write it in any form, so I'm going to leave it right like that. Okay. Question 12. They're asking us multiple questions on that same equation. So once again, I'm going to factor it. It's going to go to 3 and 2. Oh, it's still the same. Yeah, still the same guy. So plus and minus, and it's over 3x minus 1. So question 12, find the x-intercepts. So guys, make sure you write these as ordered pairs. And remember the other variable, which is the y, is the 0. So to find the x-intercept, I let y be a 0, which is the same as letting the blank be a 0, and that blank is top. So if I set the x minus 2 equal to 0, I get a 2. This is a 1. It's odd. You don't have to write that, though, because they're actually not asking you that. We're not graphing it or anything. This guy right here, set it equal to 0, negative 3 comma 0. Highlight your answer. Done. Number 13, find the y-intercept. You let the x be a 0. For sure, it's easier to let x be a 0 in the non-factored version, because look, guys, anything that has an x just goes away. So it's a negative 6 over negative 1, which is positive 6. Okay. Number 14. They want vertical asymptote and non-vertical asymptote. I know vertical asymptote comes from the bottom, and so I'm going to factor the bottom. So the 12 is going to split to a 4 and a 3 because they multiply to give me 12 and subtract to give me 1. Biggest is the negative. So vertical asymptotes come from the bottom. So that one right there is x equals negative 3. This one right here is x equals 4. This is really important. I know that they will take all the points off. You cannot write it like that. That is not a vertical intercept. Vertical asymptote, I mean. So please don't write it like that. You have to write two separate asymptotes, okay? Question 15, the non-vertical asymptote is biggest over biggest. If you look at the original problem, which is this, you've got an x to the first over an x to the second. The bottom's bigger, which means the asymptote is y equals 0. So make sure you have that memorized, okay? Okay, question 16. So, this is the one, oh no, not this one. It's 17 that my students really struggled with last semester. So if x is 1, so you've got this piecewise function here. Okay, so x is equal to 1, so it'd be that guy. So all you do is just go 2 times 1 minus 1. 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1 is 1. That's your answer, okay? F of negative 1. Negative 1 is less than 1, so I'm using the top equation, equation 1. So you have to show work. Negative 1 plus 1 squared, that's 0 squared, which is a 0. And then the last one is f of 2. That's greater than or equal to 1. So you go 2 times 2 minus 1, that's 4 minus 1, which is a 3, and you're done. Okay, so 17 is the one that my students really did bad on. So find the x-intercepts. Well, to find the x-intercept, you're going to let y be a 0. The problem is you don't know which of those graphs, is going to be touching the x-axis. So I absolutely recommend that you graph this thing. So if you go down 2, make a dot, I'm graphing the line, and then up 3, right 1, down 3, left 1. So there's a second point. That line's only supposed to be there for x values that are less than 0. So this circle right here is actually supposed to be opened, okay? And I'm going to go that way. So there's obviously no x-intercept on the line. You don't even have to finish graphing the parabola. I know it's going to be on the right side of the graph, and I know it's going to open up, and so it's going to eventually hit that x-axis. So that's all I really have to process through. So now I'm going to go x to second plus 2x minus 8 is equal to 0. And then I'm going to factor, so it goes x and x. The 8 goes to a 4 and a 2. Signs are different. Biggest is the positive. So that gives me x equals 2 and x equals negative 4. So then what my students did last year is they were like, okay, it's that one, right? But my second graph, you guys, is over here. That's where the x values are bigger than 0. So negative 4 0 is a part of that graph, but not on this piecewise because of the restriction. So there's your only answer. So be careful on that one. Okay, question 18. So you've got this formula. A projectile is fired from a cliff 100 feet above the water with an inclination of 45 degrees to the horizontal with a muzzle velocity of 40 feet per second. The height of the projectile above the water is given by this equation. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 32 over 40 squared, and I'm going to write it as a decimal, okay? So I'm going to go 32 divided by that, and I get 0.02. Okay, so this is really negative 0.02 x to the second plus x plus 150. So if that ugly fraction is a nice decimal, meaning a decimal that ends, then write it as a decimal for sure. Okay, and they tell you that x is, so the y is the height, and that is in feet, and the x is the distance from the cliff, and that is also in feet. Okay, so at what horizontal distance from the face of the cliff? So they want the x value. Is it at a maximum? So it's just negative b over 2a, guys. So it's just going to be negative 1 over 2 times negative 0.02. Two negatives gives me a positive. So I'm going to go 1 divided by parenthesis, 2 times 0.02, close it off, hit enter, and I get 25. Be very careful to label. So it's 25 feet, and that's your answer. Okay, number 19. Consider this, which is a correct first step. So this is a super easy problem. We only can hope that we get this on our test. So this is a critical numbers type 2 because you have a fraction. And so step 1 for critical numbers type 2 is always to pull that guy over, and it looks like that. So if you look, the correct answer is C. Now it does say circle all that apply. So on question A, they did the reciprocal of both of them and reversed them. That is not what you do. The second one, they got rid of the denominators. You can't get rid of the denominators. So the correct answer is C, and we're done. Question 20, the rational expression has these critical numbers. Solve it, basically. So what they're doing is they've started the problem for you, but I'm going to just write this out because I think it's important to be able to see it. So the bottom factors to a 4 and a 2. Signs are different. Biggest is the positive. So the critical numbers from the top are negative 2/3. From the bottom are 2 and negative 4, and those are the numbers they gave me. Okay, so now I'm just going to go to my number line. The negative 4 is over here. The positive 2 is over here. And so the negative 2/3 is going to be about right there. So the bottom numbers are restrictions. So the positive 2 has to be an open circle. The negative 4 also has to be an open circle. The 2/3 is a closed circle because it comes from the top and you have an equal sign. So this is the one where you have to determine the signs, okay? So prior to factoring, this is what it looked like. Where the sign change happens, that's where my 0 is. I always just test a 0. So those all go away. And if x is a 0, I'm going to end up getting a negative. So this would be a negative. So now I know the signs are negative, positive, negative, positive. Make sure your signs are there. Also make sure you shade. So greater than means positive. So that would be here and here. And they want your answer in interval form. So it would be negative 4 with a parenthesis to negative 2/3 with a bracket, union 2 with a parenthesis to infinity. That's your final answer. Please make sure you box or highlight that answer and you're done. Okay, 21. So we have another correct first step, and those are always so wonderful. Okay, so if you have an absolute value with an equal sign, step 1 is to isolate it. So you're going to pull your 5 over and it becomes a 6. So question A or option A, they dropped absolute values. That's wrong. Question B is what we just did. Question C, they combined the 2 and the negative 5 and got a negative 3. That's false. So it's B. Okay, question 22. Solve this. Okay, so this is a critical numbers type 2 because you have a fraction and an inequality. So step 1, get a 1 on the right hand side. So it looks like that. Okay, step 2, get a common denominator. So you just pull those together. You guys, lots of you are forgetting to put the greater than 0. You have to write a complete sentence, a complete line. If you don't have that greater than 0, guys, these are not mathematically equivalent, and you're saying something that is inaccurate. So you have got to be thorough. So that has to be there. So this guy has a 2x minus 1. He's missing the x minus 1. Distribute, I get 5x minus 5. This guy has the x minus 1. He's missing the 2x minus 1. Distribute, I get a negative 2x plus 1. 5x minus 2x is a 3x. Negative 5 and a positive 1 is a negative 4. The bottom stays the way it is. Make sure you write a complete sentence right there. Now I'm going to go to critical numbers. So from the top, I get 4/3. From the bottom, I get 1/2 and I get a 1. I don't have to worry about restrictions because I don't have an equal sign anyway. Okay, so I'm going to go 1/2 is here. 1 1/3, which is 4/3 is here. Your 1 is going to be maybe not that close, but closer. So maybe like that. Okay, everything's going to be open. You guys, please exaggerate your circles so we can tell. And then if x is a 0, it's kind of tougher on these ones. I'm just going to do this right here. You could totally put it in your calculator, but look how easy. If x is a 0, you have a negative 4 on the top. You have a negative 1 here and a negative 1 here. 3 negatives gives you a negative. So I know that's going to be a negative. I know my signs are going to alternate because these exponents are all 1s. So I have positive, negative, positive, negative. Greater than means positive. So that would be here and here. So my answer in interval form is negative infinity to 1/2 with the parenthesis. Please don't forget your u. 1 to 4/3 with the parenthesis, and you're done. If you forget your u, they take off a lot of points. Okay, question 23.